The sun hung low over the sprawling Montana plains, painting the sky in hues of amber and rose, as Clara rode her mare, Daisy, along the dirt trail that wound through her family's ranch. Her auburn hair danced in the warm breeze, and her heart felt as wild and untamed as the land around her. At 22, Clara had grown up with the rhythm of the rancho, mending fences, herding cattle, and watching the seasons change. Yeah, but she'd never known the kind of love that set her soul ablaze. She'd heard stories of cowboys who drifted through town, their boots kicking up dust and their smiles stealing hearts, but none had ever stayed long enough to matter. That is, until she saw him. Jace Colton, with his weathered Stetson and eyes as deep as a midnight sky, had arrived at the ranch a week ago, hired to help with the summer cattle drive. He was different, quiet, deliberate, with a gentleness that belied the roughness of his calloused hands. Clara had caught him watching her from across the corral, his gaze lingering longer than necessary, stirring something unfamiliar in her chest. That evening, as the stars began to speckle the sky, she found herself alone by the barn, brushing Daisy's coat, when Jace approached. His boots crunched softly on the gravel, and his voice, low and warm, broke the silence. "Mind if I join you, Clara?" he asked, leaning against the barn door, his silhouette framed by the fading light. She nodded, her throat suddenly tight, and they fell into an easy conversation about horses, the land, and dreams they hadn't dared speak aloud to anyone else. Hours passed like minutes, and as the moon rose, Jace stepped closer, his breath warm against her cheek. "Clara," he murmured, "I've been a wanderer all my life, but something about you makes me want to stay." Before she could respond, he tilted her chin gently, and their lips met in a kiss that felt like the first spark of a wild fury, soft, tentative, then all-consuming. Her first kiss, under the vast Montana sky, was everything she'd never known she needed. She pulled back, breathless, her heart pounding like hoofbeats, and saw in his eyes a promise that this was only the beginning. They stood there, wrapped in the quiet of the night, as the world seemed to pause just for them. Clara didn't know it yet, but that kiss would change everything, setting her on a path she'd never imagined, toward a love that would test her heart in ways she couldn't foresee. The days that followed were a blur of stolen glances and moments that felt stolen from time itself. Clara and Jace worked side by side on the ranch, their hands brushing as they passed tools or shared a canteen under the blistering sun. Every touch sent a jolt through her, and every smile he gave her felt like a secret only they shared. The other ranch hands noticed, their teasing laced with good-natured envy, but Clara didn't care. She was falling, and she didn't want to stop. Jace told her stories of his life via growing up on the road, moving from one ranch to another, never staying long enough to call any place home. "I've always been running," he admitted one afternoon as they sat by the creek, their bare feet dangling in the cool water. "But you, Clara, you make me think home might be a person, not a place." His words wrapped around her heart, and she found herself telling him things she'd never shared, her fear of being trapped on the ranch forever, her dreams of seeing the world, her longing for a love that felt as big as the horizon. That night, at the ranch's annual barn dance, the air was thick with the scent of hay and the sound of fiddles. Jace pulled her onto the dance floor, his hand firm on her waist, and they swayed under the string lights, the world fading until it was just them. As the music slowed, he leaned in, his lips grazing her ear. "I don't know what's coming, Clara, but I know I want you in it," he whispered. Their second kiss was bolder, hungrier, and Clara felt her walls crumble. But beneath the joy, a shadow lingered. She'd overheard her father talking about selling part of the ranch to pay off debts, and Jace had mentioned a job offer in Wyoming, one that could pull him away. The thought of losing him, just as she'd found him, gnawed at her. Later, as they walked hand in hand under the stars, she asked, "What happens when the summer ends, Jace? Will you leave?" He stopped, turning to face her, his expression serious. "I've left every place I've ever been, but I'm not leaving you, not unless you tell me to go." His words were a vow, but Clara couldn't shake the fear that promises, like summer, could fade. Still, she clung to the warmth of his hand, choosing to believe in the moment, even as uncertainty loomed like a storm on the horizon. Summer burned on, and with it, Clara and Jace's love grew fiercer. They stole moments whenever they could, early mornings watching the sunrise from the hilltop, late nights by the fire, their laughter mingling with the crackle of burning wood. Jace taught her how to lasso, his arms guiding hers, his voice a steady hum of encouragement. Clara, in turn, showed him the hidden corners of the ranch, the meadow where wildflowers bloomed, the old oak where she'd carved her initials as a child. Each moment felt like a thread weaving them closer, but the weight of reality pressed harder. The ranch was struggling, and her father's temper grew shorter with every bill that arrived. Clara overheard him arguing with her mother about selling the land to a developer, a move that would change their lives forever. She confided in Jace, her voice trembling as she admitted how much the ranch meant to her, how it was the only home she'd ever known. He listened, his hands squeezing hers, and promised to help however he could. "I've got some savings," he said. "It's not much, but it's yours if it'll keep this place alive." His offer stunned her, and not just for its generosity, but for what it meant about his feelings. Yet, the Wyoming job offer still hung over them. Jace hadn't given his answer, and Clara couldn't bring herself to ask again, afraid of what he'd say. One evening, as they rode out to check the fences, a storm rolled in, sudden and fierce. They took shelter in an old cabin, rain pounding the roof, and in the dim light, Jace pulled her close. "Clara, I've been thinking," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I don't want to just pass through your life. I want to build something with you here, anywhere." Their kiss was desperate, fueled by the storm outside and the one brewing in their hearts. But as lightning flashed, Clara saw the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Was he ready to stay, or was he still the cowboy who couldn't help but wander? She wanted to believe his promise, but the ranch's future and their own was slipping through her fingers like sand. As they rode back in the rain-soaked dawn, she resolved to fight for both the land and the man she loved, even if it meant facing hard truths. The cattle drive was the ranch's last hope, a grueling trek to deliver the herd to market and bring in enough money to stave off the creditors. Clara and Jace worked tirelessly, their days filled with dust, sweat, and the relentless pace of the trail. Side by side, they herded cattle across miles of rugged terrain, their bond deepening with every challenge they faced. At night, under a blanket of stars, they'd lie close, sharing dreams and fears. "I've never had someone like you," Jace confessed one night, his voice barely above a whisper. "Someone who makes me want to be better." Clara's heart swelled, but the weight of the drive pressed on her. If it failed, the ranch would be sold, and with it, the life she'd always known. Jace seemed to sense her worry, always finding ways to make her laugh, a playful nudge, a silly story about his days as a rodeo rider. But the Wyoming offer lingered, unspoken, like a ghost between them. One afternoon, as they rested by a river, a ranch hand let slip that Jace had been seen talking to the Wyoming recruiter on a call. Clara's stomach twisted. That night, she confronted him, her voice shaking. "Are you leaving, Jace?" After all this, he looked stricken, his hands reaching for hers. "I haven't decided," he admitted. "It's good money, Clara, money that could help the ranch, but I don't want it if it means losing you." His honesty disarmed her, and they kissed, a fierce, searching kiss that held all their unspoken fears. The drive pushed on, and Clara threw herself into it, determined to save the ranch and prove to Jace that they could build a life together. But as they neared the market, a stampede threatened to ruin everything. Jace risked his life to turn the herd, earning her father's grudging respect and Clara's unwavering love. In the aftermath, as they sat bruised and exhausted, he took her hand. "I'm staying," he said simply. "You're my home, Clara." The words were a bomb, but the drive's success was still uncertain, and Clara knew their future hung in the balance, as fragile as the dawn. The market was a whirlwind of noise and chaos, with buyers haggling and cattle lowing as Clara and Jace worked to secure the best price for the herd. Every dollar counted, and Clara's heart raced with the hope that this would be enough to save the ranch. Jace was her rock, negotiating with a quiet confidence that made her proud. When the final sale was made, the numbers were better than expected, but not enough to clear all the debts. Clara's father was grim, talking of selling a parcel of land to a developer who'd been circling like a vulture. Clara felt her world tilt, but Jace squeezed her hand, his eyes steady. "We'll find a way," he promised. Back at the ranch, The tension was palpable. Her father called a family meeting, and Clara braced for the worst. Jace, though not family, stood by her side, his presence a quiet strength. To everyone's surprise, he spoke up, offering his savings again and suggesting they turn part of the ranch into a guest lodge to bring in steady income. People would pay to experience this life, he said, his voice earnest. The land, the horses, the star set its magic. Clara's father scoffed, but her mother saw the potential, and slowly, the idea took root. That night, Clara and Jace sat on the porch, the weight of the day heavy between them. "You didn't have to do that," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "Your money, your future." He cut her off with a kiss, slow and deliberate. "My future's with you," he said. "I meant it when I said you're my home." But the developer's offer was still on the table, and Clara's father was leaning toward it. She felt torn between her love for the ranch and her fear of holding Jace back from a life he might want elsewhere. As they kissed again, under the same stars where they'd shared their first, she wondered if love could be enough to anchor them both, or if the pull of the world beyond would tear them apart. The ranch's fate, and their own, was still uncertain, but Clara held on to Jace's promise, praying it would be enough. The next weeks were a battle of wills. Clara's father wavered, torn between the developer's cash and Jace's vision for a guest lodge. Clara threw herself into the plan, sketching ideas for cabins, horseback tours, and stargazing nights, with Jace by her side, crunching numbers and sharing stories of ranches he'd seen thrive this way. Their partnership was seamless, each filling the gaps in the other's strengths, and Clara felt a flicker of hope that they could save the ranch without losing its soul. But the developer was relentless, offering more money and painting a picture of a modernized ranch with condos and paved roads. Clara's father, worn down by years of struggle, was tempted. One evening, Clara overheard him on the phone, agreeing to meet the developer. Her heart sank, and she ran to Jace, tears streaming down her face. "They're going to sell," she choked out. He held her, his arm steady, and promised they'd fight. "This ranch is you, Clara. We won't let it go." The next day, they rallied the ranch hands, who loved the land as much as Clara did, and together they